Hello and welcome to this month's Humble Choice Review. Time has flown past and it's once again the beginning of the month. This month is slightly different than usual. All 13 games are given to Classic and Premium subs, alongside 2 Humble Originals. I'll be reviewing each and every game to help you decide what to pick. Generously, this video is sponsored by GGPlayers.com. GGPlayers is a community with frequent giveaways ranging from the latest bundles to Steam gift cards and AAA titles like Cyberpunk. I'll talk more about the community at the end of this video, but for now, thanks to GG Players for paying the bundle's cost. I'll still be reviewing this bundle as normal, and GG Players has no affiliation to Humble Bundle. The first Humble Original is Booth. It's exactly what a Humble Original should be. A game which offers something unique, whether that's visually or mechanically. In this case, the originality comes from the gameplay. You play as Ned, a newly recruited booth worker. Booths are small apartments where food must be sorted to ensure it's up to quality. You sort through the food, ensuring its weight is within the correct boundaries and colour is correct. There's also some backstory with mention to a global food shortage and an interesting opening which I won't spoil. Throughout the prologue, I also encountered many characters who offered some interesting dialogue about the game's world. From these characters, I picked up several clues, and although the reason for the clue's existence hasn't been explained yet, I'm intrigued to what I'll need to solve. I played the prologue, and I definitely feel as if there's more to the game than what I've played thus far, so I think I'll play another chapter to see if I'll continue. The next Humble Original is Zodiac XX. I originally had issues playing this as there is no keyboard or mouse support and my Stadia controller was not detected. I plugged in my DualShock and it worked perfectly. In terms of gameplay, you control an underwater ship, with controls being similar to that of a light dangerous. You adjust pitch, yaw and acceleration, all pretty standard for this type of game. The beginning of the game gives you some detail on the story and it all seems pretty standard to me. Before a mission, you choose a character, but I'm unsure what they actually do. The first mission made me destroy some enemy infrastructure by flying around undersea. By locking in and firing weapons, targets can be destroyed. Unfortunately, this type of game isn't for me. If you like the look of this ship-based gameplay, then it's definitely worth a try, but I won't return. Vampyr is a narrative-heavy action game where, unsurprisingly, you play as a vampire. First things first, this game is about a vampire, so naturally there's a lot of blood and gore. My knowledge of vampires comes solely from what we do in the shadows, both the film and the show. I'll be clear though, Vampyr is not a comedy. The game contains all the vampiric actions I was expecting. You need to feed, lurk in the shadows, and avoid sunlight. The story and dialogue are simply astounding. You play as a doctor who's only just become a vampire, and the introduction displays his pure confusion and frenzy. The narration sounds like it's been lifted from a chapter of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Our lead character is exactly like Dr. Jekyll in the novel, recounting his horrifying experience. The game so far is a masterclass in writing. For good writing, you need good voice acting, and the voice work so far has been exceptional, offering some truly grounded emotion. The atmosphere of 1980 London is exceptional, with dark fog and the dirty dockyard streets. The graphics are mostly well done, offering detail and great lighting. Facial details aren't the best here, but it doesn't distract from the experience. Animations and cutscenes can sometimes be a bit wonky, which contrasts to the rest of the game. Gameplay and combat is third person. Weapons can be used, as well as your vampire abilities. And let's be honest, in a vampire game, swords will be your second choice. As a vampire, you need to feed on enemies to survive, and be able to use unique undead abilities. The music here is very well done, with orchestral notes rising when action occurs, and falling when combat ends. The sounds of violins really helps to create the dark atmosphere. I've said before that darker games such as Hellblade's Senua's Sacrifice from June aren't for me, and this is still the case. I totally understand why people enjoy these games, but for me, part of gaming's putting a smile on my face, and I prefer to spend 20 hours on something a bit more light-hearted. Still, Vampyr is a mastermind in game making, and if a narrative-based vampire game sounds appealing, this is definitely something you should stick your teeth into. Up next is Hello Neighbour, or should I say Hello Neighbours. This month includes the main game, Hello Neighbour, as well as the prequel, Hide and Seek. Both games are stealth horrors with a more lighter tone to other games in the genre. I'll focus on the original game in this review and add some thoughts about hide and seek later, because the gameplay in both are very similar. You begin as a child playing with their football when you notice shrieks coming from your neighbour's house. Then it's up to you to sneak into the neighbour's house and uncover secrets. First off, let's deal with the horror, in inverted commas. When it comes to horror, I'm terrible with it and get scared easily, especially with jump scares. This game is littered with jump scares. I was constantly followed by the neighbour and he often ran straight towards me. Fortunately for me, the game has a nice colourful aesthetic and a snippet of music plays before the neighbour attacks, giving me some fair warning. So for me, it didn't necessarily scare me, but the neighbours made me cautious when sneaking around, which is definitely good for a horror game. Next up is the puzzles. These puzzles are just bad. Many of them require parkour, but the controls are clunky, and even stacking boxes on top of each other took many tries. The puzzles involve collecting keys to unlock a new room. No puzzles are explained, so I did have to use a walkthrough guide to get through some sections. It's disappointing, and some hints would have been appreciated. Throughout, I was constantly being chased by the neighbour, which added a nice sense of urgency. To those who wanted to play this without the scarier parts, there's an option to make the neighbour less powerful by turning off the trap AI. Although this isn't a game that should be played for the puzzles, and without the neighbour it becomes a very poor experience. Speaking of the trap AI, it's a really cool feature that will change the neighbour's behaviour after each death to adapt to your actions. For example, if you usually enter through a specific door, the neighbour will notice this and place a trap there. This constantly keeps you on your toes. Like mentioned before, you also get the prequel included. It's very similar gameplay, but in this game you play as a neighbour's child, and the game will reveal more backstory as to why the neighbour is so spooky. Again, this faces the same issue as the first game, with no clear goals and a lot of open-endedness. The game doesn't need to be easier, I just like to be told what to do. Overall, Hello Neighbour was disappointing to me, as I'd heard good things from others. Sneaking around the house was fun and kept me on the edge, but the poor controls, physics and puzzles left me wanting a lot more. Wargroove is a turn-based tactics game with some gorgeous pixel art. First off, this game is inspired by Advance Wars and Fire Emblem. I played neither of these games, so this is my first entry into the Advance Wars genre. The game boots up with a cool anime intro and then offers a few modes to choose from. I played through the prologue of the main campaign for my review, but there's also multiplayer and a level editor. The first mission made me play as the antagonists of the story. It gave me some insight into the world of Wargroove. By engaging in combat and taking down guards, my character eventually killed the king. The dialogue works well and there's some narration, although this is mostly one-line quips. After the king's demise, I then played as his daughter, the new queen. With the new queen and a couple of hints and tips, I was ready to start the proper campaign. Combat is grid-based and different units can be purchased during the levels, and these must be allocated to certain positions. Units can then engage in combat. In terms of health, the game uses a percentage-based system, which, to be honest, I don't fully understand yet. The number next to each unit, both friendly and enemy, represents the percentage of health available. For example, if a guard had 1 next to them, it means they have 10% health. If it was 5, then they have 50%. Injured units will have much less damage than a full health one. As well as this, units will perform differently depending on their position on the map. For example, Pikemans will deal more damage if it's adjacent to another of the same unit. This position feature, along with the amount of health impacting damage, creates a really interesting feature where a unit's position is as important as the damage caused. To complete the levels, all enemy strongholds must be captured, which can be achieved by attacking their buildings and moving in. With the threat of ensuing enemies and the need to capture, a good level of challenge is present. The game also features some incredible pixel art and some good music. I recommend playing with headphones as there's some positional audio which surprised me. I think that everyone should check this one out. It offers some very good combat and pixel art. The campaign apparently lasts 20 hours, so if you're wanting a game to put some time in, take a look at Wargroove. Call of Cthulhu is a detective RPG set in the Lovecraftian universe. Aside from Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones from June's month, I haven't read or paid much interest into H.P. Lovecraft's works. The game begins with visions of otherworldly creatures stuck inside a cave, which turned out to be a nightmare. Once the nightmare is finished, I took control of private investigator Pierce, who looks and sounds very much like the lead of Vampyr. It's the same voice actor, which will give you some idea into the atmosphere. Like Vampyr, Call of Cthulhu's atmosphere is gloomy and mysterious. The game is third person and features your standard detective fare. Ask questions, uncover clues, and solve the case. The case to solve in this one involves a wealthy industrialist daughter who died along with her family in a fire. Of course, as this is a game set in Lovecraft's universe, not all is as it seems. Sailors tell old tales of the creatures in the depths, and there's a constant fog lingering in the air. I'm enjoying the atmosphere so far, and can describe it as more unsettling as opposed to straight up horror. Controls have worked well, and with my RTX 2070 I haven't encountered any frame rate or performance issues. There are a few issues of animation with odd facial expressions and jerky movements. For me though, the atmosphere and gameplay outweighs this issue. I'm looking forward to asking more questions to the residents and uncovering the mysteries of this atmospheric RPG. Little Big Workshop is a factory management game in a miniature scale. I began by playing the tutorial, which explained the basics. The entire game takes place in a single factory, which is expanded throughout your playthrough. The first task was to make some wooden gnomes. Before I accepted the order, I had to make a plan. This meant choosing good quality materials and ensuring I had the required equipment. I assigned storage and linked my work tables to specific tasks. The game has a really nice look to it, as all the characters and buildings have been shrunk to fit on someone's table. Because of this, tiny trucks come to deliver materials and take away products. Pencils and a telephone towered above my factory, while small workers got on with their assigned jobs. Once I completed the tutorial, I discovered the sheer enormity of this game. There are relations to manage, products to source, workers to pay, and individual products to construct. A big factory game like this isn't for me, but I still enjoyed my time. I personally won't return, but if the style of gameplay interests you, then Little Big Workshop offers a lot of content and a lot of charm. Up next is Genesis Alpha 1 Deluxe Edition, an action roguelike with management and construction elements. The game works in two parts. First I constructed the actual ship. New elements snapped onto each other, creating a large spacecraft. Then I followed the tutorials, which gave good guidance on what to do. Mostly. I say mostly as one part of the tutorial said to open the survival guide. I could not find a survival guide anywhere and checked through key bindings as well as searching the ship. The survival guide can actually be accessed by opening the PDA with the T key. I really wish this was explained better, as I spent a lot of wasted time on something so simple. The main goal of the game is to save the human race from extinction. No small feat to say the least. Of course, with a goal this big, the game will take a lot of time and steps. There are different buildings to manage, such as the oxygen in the greenhouse, and resources to collect. Members of the ship can be assigned to perform ship functions. The tutorial is very long, so long that I couldn't complete it in the time I allocate for each game. From what I played, I've realised this game isn't for me. Resource management just isn't an aspect I enjoy. Graphically though, the game looks great. Running at Ultra, there are some well-detailed objects and lighting effects. The overall atmosphere and visual style reminds me a lot of GTFO, although fortunately I haven't yet encountered any alien life in Genesis Alpha. Like in GTFO, terminals are where the main bulk of management takes place. I enjoyed using these terminals, and the game made it easy to switch between the different ones by using the right button on the mouse. Overall, if a roguelike set in space but you can switch between ship construction and first person sounds interesting, take a look. It's not a game for me, but I don't think it's a bad game at all. Automachef is a food management puzzler which I picked up on my Switch at launch a year ago. It's a really fun game with a lot of charm. You place different machines down in order to supply a given food. Conveyor belts, assemblers and other contraptions all work together to produce, cook and dispatch food. There's also some funny dialogue from a robot who helps offer tips and often reveals their plan to take over the world. There's an abundance of levels with different updates since launch, providing even more free content. I've got through a fair bit of the campaign on my Switch, but there's also a sandbox mode. Controls are simple, making it easy to place, rotate and connect machines together. You're scored on efficiency. Sure, you can make a massive sprawling machine, but you get more points if it's compact and makes food fast. As a fan of the puzzle genre, this offered a real challenge for me, but it starts off fairly easy, so the basics can be learnt first. You're not just thrown straight into the action, which is a problem I often encounter with this genre. This is an easy recommendation. Through the Darkest of Times is a strategy game set in Nazi Germany. The Steam page is honest in the style of gameplay. you control a small resistant group, standing up against unjust events and partaking in small-scale resistance activities. The developers are frank that you won't be able to stop the war, but you will be able to make differences and save persecuted lives. The game takes place during key events in the Nazis' rise to power. As someone who studied living under Nazi rule, the game gives a real glimpse into the lives of the German people. Interactive scenes allow you to choose what to do in certain scenarios. An elderly Jewish man was being attacked by Nazi officials, and I decided to intervene. Later on in the game, I was imprisoned, presumably due to my interference. This showed that there's real consequence to your actions. Do you do the morally right thing and risk persecution, or stay silent? In terms of gameplay, I began by creating a custom character from a few options. Then I first encountered the other people in my very small resistant group. Dialogue choices changed how I interacted with them. After that, a map of Germany is shown, and resistant members can be allocated to locations to achieve different goals. For example, I sent some members to recruit new troops, and another to collect money for the cause. All the while, the group's motivation, money, and size must be managed. This is a really interesting game, portraying the indoctrination and life under Nazi rule. From what I've played so far, historical events are moving through quite quickly, so I don't think a playthrough of this should take too long. This is a game I'll certainly play more of. American Fugitive is a top-down GTA-like game. To start this review off, I haven't played any of the early GTA games, which many others have compared this style of gameplay to. I have, however, played GTA Online and have recently been spending a lot of time in Watch Dogs 2, so I enjoy these open world types of games. I was impressed by American Fugitive, and from what I played so far, there seems to be more of a consequence to my actions. From a third-person top-down view, you control a fugitive escaped from prison on his quest to find his dad's killer. The story seemed fairly typical of a crime-inspired game thus far, but I've only played the first half an hour, so it may open up in the future. It's got your typical actions which you'd expect, such as breaking and entering, avoiding the police, and driving cars. But what stood out to me is the aforementioned consequences. For example, once I escaped from prison, I had to change clothes so people couldn't spot me in my prison clothes. Likewise, cars that have been involved in a crime must be ditched so that the police cannot notice you. In fact, I accidentally hit a lamppost, and this counted as property damage, causing a police chase. It's a welcome addition, which I haven't seen in any of these types of games before. It's always funny in GTA Online, having stolen a jet and then escaping from the police, despite walking around the street with neon hair and a baffling fashion choice. American Fugitive makes things slightly more realistic. I've really enjoyed playing American Fugitive, with its unique take on the so-called GTA genre, and will return for some top-down open-world goodness. Coma 2 Vicious Sister is a 2D survival horror. I'll begin by saying I hate horror games, and usually avoid them at all costs. I just don't find any enjoyment in being scared. Still, I need to review the games, so I waited until daylight, turned on all the lights I could find, and sat down to play. So take my thoughts from someone who doesn't enjoy horror. You play as a school student who stays after school late, and guess what? There just so happens to be a blood moon. There are some big bad people who don't want you lurking around the now infested school corridors. I played a bit, but had to stop. The hand-drawn art style is nice, which works well with the comic-style cutscenes to help provide the narrative. The game scared me, so the horror side worked, but then again, I get scared easily. The game has 98% overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, so it must definitely be a good game, just not a game that's good to me. We Were Here Together is a strictly online multiplayer adventure. You and one other player, who also owns the game, must team up to solve puzzles and make it through the blizzard. Thank you to Austin from Bombchew for teaming up with me so I could play the game. Austin and I began in a lodge surrounded by snow. There are several wheels scattered across the course, which after some time we located and used to unlock new doors. Next up, we found 2 screens with a sound wave on each. I used the downstairs screen and moved the wave so that it matched with the one on Austin's screen. I'll avoid spoiling the other challenges, but these types of teamwork puzzles are frequent in the game. The game visually looks really nice, and the puzzles so far have been a nice level of challenge. We are never completely stuck, but did have to think. The Steam page hints at a slightly darker tone, so don't let the cartoon nature fool you. It's a good game, but the problem I have is that it requires 2 players to each have a copy. All my friends in England aren't subscribed to Humble Choice or own the game, so I had to ask the kind folks on the Bombchew Discord for some help. I do wish that this month included a giftable copy of the game to share with a friend, but I totally understand the issues this could cause. If you've got a friend who owns a copy of the game, I've had a lot of fun so far. If, however, you're the only one with a copy, then there's no single player support whatsoever. The final game of the bundle, A Case of Distrust, could probably be described as a visual novel because essentially it's a novel with some very nice visuals. Set in 1924 San Francisco, you play as a private investigator. In terms of visual novels, you want good visuals and writing. A Case of Distrust certainly delivers on this front. There are some wonderful transitions between scenes and colour is used very well. Alongside the visuals, there's a groovy soundtrack with all the finger snapping and jazz I've come to expect when it comes to being a detective. The writing here is impeccable, with clever descriptions of characters. As a detector, you'll be asked to provide evidence which you can choose. For example, I was asked to give a cat proof that I was out of food. There are several options to choose from, but I gave the evidence that my fridge was empty. The evidence-based system offers some interactivity to the visual novel, but nevertheless, most of the game comes from reading a lot of text. The game reportedly takes around 3 hours to complete, and I'll definitely return to see more of these unique visuals and great writing. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, GGPlayers has paid for the bundle. By joining ggplayers.com, you'll be able to enter a variety of giveaways. The community uses many security measures such as Steam profile checks to ensure that the winners play the games. The community also has a Discord with flash giveaways, competitions and good conversation. At the moment there's a special event on with a Cyberpunk 2077, Horizon Zero Dawn and $65 Steam card giveaway. Join the community today by using the link in the description. Now it's time to finish off this review. So what should you drop? Well, actually this month includes every choice for classic and premium subscribers, so you don't need to drop anything. This month is a definite step in the right direction for Humble Choice. There are some excellent big titles in this month such as Vampyr and Call of Cthulhu. For me though, the smaller titles in this month were best enjoyed. Wargroove was a pleasant surprise, as was Case of Distrust and Through the Darkest of Times, which both offer some unique gameplay. The Humble Original Booth was also much enjoyed. This month is such an easy one to recommend. There's puzzlers, horrors, multiplayer and games from the detective genre. I'm certain you'll find a few games you'll enjoy, even if, like me, there's some games that just aren't for you. I'd like to thank everyone for their support on the channel. Last month received 4 times the views than June's review, and there was a noticeable increase in subs. Likewise, thank you to Double Chris for their support on Patreon. I'll see you next month.